is making another ghost self. And so you can see why there's also a buildup of these negative personality spirits around the earth, because we just keep making them as we keep incarnating. There are some spirits who can never communicate with us. They may be really inferior, or hasn't crossed over yet. There's some who are being punished who, without a superior permission, cannot. Sometimes it's granted only for the greater good. Some spirits have to have a better degree of advancement to, like, just like a medium. They need to be advanced enough to be able to talk to us sometimes. Like more efficiently, like a greater scope of communication than just like a boo, A trial or punishment, or a cease in our abilities might happen. Um, we can have spirits that are like, uh, they're like the gateways for other spirits, or they're kind of like trackers. They can go get spirits and then bring them back to us also, but they're like really far in other realms, different points of space or the universe. But we can't understand the transmission of thoughts among spirits. All I can tell you is that the spirits you invoke, however distant they may be, receives a rebound of thought like an electrical beam or commotion, sort of like radar or like a satellite. Your thoughts beam out an energy Batman signal to the spirit, and they can hear you just like a telephone. And that's why this technology was very interesting to the spiritists of the time. Is universal fluid or astral body the vehicle of thought, or is the air itself the sound? Um, yes, both, but just if we speak into the air with sound, there's a limited radius around us, whereas our thought is actually what is infinite. Spirit in space is like a traveler in the midst of a vast plain who, hearing their name suddenly pronounced, will direct their attention to where they are called. Distance is but trifle to spirits. Yet we are astonished to see them respond as quickly as if they had already been here. And sometimes, if the prayer is premeditated, the spirit is forewarned and will come to us before we even begin our prayers. So that's why they set up seances at certain dates so that spirits know to come. They get the spirit RSVP, they get the invitation to come. If we've been thinking about praying to a certain spirit, or on Thursday, I'm going to do this service or something, then sometimes the spirit already knows because we're thinking about it. A spirit can more easily hear us if they're sympathetic or kind to us. They're more quickly touched, such as the voice of a friend who we recognize. If it's not well directed, it will often strike in the void. If we call to someone who's indifferent or antipathetic, they may hear but won't listen. And this is also why we should pray for suffering souls, because although they may not come or help us, we don't want them to necessarily come around us. They can hear us and be comforted by our words. Does the spirit come voluntarily, or are they made to come? He obeys the will of God, the general rule that rules the universe. Um, if they judge it useful to come, there's still their free will. A spirit will come to useful end. They will only refuse to answer if you're not serious or if it's a joke. And this is why we pray also and use call to superior spirits, guardian angels, and God and stuff like that, because they have more spiritual authority on the spiritual realm. And I'm sure they can use other spirits that can be made to come for our useful ends in terms of constraining a spirit or forcing them to come. Can the invoked spirit refuse to come? Yes. Or it's an imposing on their free will. All beings in the universe are not at our orders. We're not obliged to answer anybody who just calls our name. We cannot force a spirit to come if the spirit is our equal or superior in morality, not in intelligence. So I might not be able to force Archangel Gabriel to come, but I could probably force, I don't know, a serial killer, whatever, who hasn't moved on in elevation because it takes them a long time. Is there any difficulty in invoking inferior spirits? Is there any danger in calling them or putting themselves in their power? They only rule people who allow themselves to be ruled. So this is also controversial in the Catholic Church, who believes that we must have been morally inferior. We are being punished by our own behavior, or we invited them somehow to obsess on us and subjugate us or possess us. Those who are assisted by good spirits have nothing to fear. We control the inferior spirits. They do not control us. In isolation, mediums who are practicing alone, especially those in the beginning, should abstain, should not be calling lower spirits. You don't have the authority, you don't have the spiritual authority, and you don't have the discernment, and you're all alone. You're more susceptible in being affected and not being able to be rescued by another medium. And no matter how developed we are as a medium, that's why we have other people around us, or even, even in voodoo, we have La Plaza, we have someone to help us manage possessions or being ridden, for example, so it doesn't go left. And other things can slip in, or other things, spirits come with other spirits, or there's other spirits waiting on the periphery to be able to come jump in. The most essential disposition is focus and concentration of thought. With serious spirits, with faith and a desire of good, is more powerful to invoke superior spirits, and in elevating our own souls by the concentration of thought. At the moment of prayer invocation, we are identified with good spirits and attract them to us. So this is all what the prayers are to for the seance or for the misa, prayer for the medium, etc. All the prayers in the yellow Kardec book. That's what all of those prayers. They set up the invocation properly. Faith is absolutely necessary. You must also desire good and wish for instruction. If we are united by thought and intention, it is more powerful with charity. Nothing's more injurious than divergence of thought. So that's why we all need to be on the same page, and we all need to be really feeling and doing these prayers of everybody that you have present in your circle. But ultimately, the president, the medium who's in charge, is one of the most responsible for ensuring this. And the energy is definitely focused on the main table in our practice for this reason. Is making a chain by joining hands for some minutes at the beginning of reunions of any use. The chain is a material means which does not promote union among us if you are not joined in thought. What is more useful is to be joined in common thought, each one calling to their good spirits or sending out love and charity. You must banish sentiment of pride and personality and have a sentiment of mutual cordiality with each other. So you can't be throwing shade or evil eye or thinking about how you don't like someone in the circle is not appropriate. You have to put aside all your bullshit, and that you guys are all united for this serious spiritual reason. Joining hands is effective, especially for a reader to hold someone's hand at the beginning of a session, or to do the chain, because it creates sort of like a whirlpool, or like the magnetism of your fluids in the room. But the mind and your heart is more important. They're stressing that. Are invocations for fixed days and hours preferable? Yes. I've already gone over why. A place consecrated to this purpose is also preferable, because the concentration of thought for this usefulness of the space is dedicated, and it's also probably more cleansed, etc. And if it's in someone's house, it's going to be more affected by the people that live there. So if it's held in the medium's house, generally that's why it's done as well, because they're the person, the owner of the house, or the person that lives in the house, is going to influence the environment of the house, of the seance. Have certain objects, such as medallions or talismans or somebody's watch, the property of attracting or repelling spirits? This is a useless question because you know that matter has no action on spirits. They're saying no, that this does not have action on spirits. I think it probably has actions on our own energetic fluids, or if you're doing psychism or mentalism with your mind. Like, I think it does, because if us joining hands with a person can have some effect, why would not us? Like, we can read the energy that's left, the fluidic energy that's left on an object by someone who is alive. So I disagree a little bit there. What must we think of spirits who give a rendezvous in dismal places and at inopportune moments? They amuse themselves at the expense of those who listen to us. It's often useless and dangerous to yield to their suggestions. Useless because we gain nothing but to be mystified. Danger because it's only what the evil spirits might do, and because of its influence on weak minds. Are there days and hours that are better for invocations? It doesn't matter. So it's not a planetary hour, etc. In Spiritism, it's when we can be least disturbed by outside influences in our regular routine, when our body and mind are most calm. Is invocation agreeable or painful for spirits? They come voluntarily. It depends on the spirit. When it's sympathetic to them, they're agreeable, attractive, and happy. They have a great happiness to communicate with mankind and only suffer from the indifference. But also depends on their character. There are spirits who don't like to be disturbed. They have ill humor, and when they're called by indifferent people, they're also not interested. A spirit um, often has no motive to come from an unknown spirit who's indifferent to them, who's often always just motivated by curiosity. If he comes, his visit will be short unless there's a serious and instructive end in view. We see people who invoke their relatives only to ask them the most ordinary things of material life, whether or not they should rent or sell their house, profit for their business, where money is deposited, or a treasure, or about their business. Our relatives are interested in us just because of the love we have for them. If our thought is limited to us being a sorcerer with them to only ask certain favors, then they cannot have very great sympathy for us, or we should not be astonished at the little kindness they may show us. Is there a difference between good and bad spirits with regard to their readiness to come at our call? There is a great difference. Bad spirits only come voluntarily, as much as they hope to govern us and make dupes. They are forced to confess their faults and asked to go away again, like a pupil asked for correction. They can be constrained by superior spirits as punishment and for instruction, and for the instruction of the incarnated. Invocation is painful for good spirits when they are called uselessness, so they will not come at all or will soon withdraw. Kind of like it hurts their brains when you hear like someone just like stupidly talk. You feel like you're losing brain cells, or just annoyed. Um, what a spirit would have not done during their lifetime, they're not usually going to do that when they're dead, or it's going to take them evolution to do that. In order to manifestations, we don't always need to invoke them, they come willingly. When a spirit comes of themselves, we cannot be sure of their identity. When we invoke a spirit by thought, they may come to us even if there's no manifestations, such as writing, because that's a material object. But it is a thought that attracts them, but we show it by writing as a manifestation. When an inferior spirit manifests themselves, we can oblige them to withdraw by not listening to them, but we cannot expect them to withdraw if we're amusing ourselves with it. The inferior spirits attach themselves to us who will listen to them like fools. Is invocation in the name of God a guarantee against intermeddling of bad spirits? The name of God is not a check all for perverse spirits, but it may restrain many. By this means, you always will remove some, and you will remove many more if it's from the bottom of the heart and not just a common mundane formula that you use. Could several spirits be invoked by name at the same time? Yes. As if you had 3 or 4 hands to write, then 3 or 4 spirits could answer you at the same time. And that is what does happen when there are several mediums. When several spirits are spontaneously invoked and there is but one medium, which one answers? One answers for all. In the same stance, could the same spirit communicate with 2 mediums at the same time? Yes. Even one answered 2 mediums at the same time, but answered one in English and one in French, but the answers were identical, almost identical to each other. They read our thoughts. But if they're inferior spirits, they may contradict each other, or they will throw pencils and baskets at each other as the mediums throw each other at each other medium. Can a spirit invoked at the same time in different places simultaneously answer in both places at once? Yes, if they're an elevated spirit. In this case, does the spirit divide themselves? No, the sun is one, but they radiate all around. They can radiate without subdividing themselves. The purer the spirit, the more their thought radiates bigger and extends like the light. Inferior spirits are too material, and they may only be able to answer a single person at once and cannot be called elsewhere necessarily. A superior spirit can, but will also give preference to the more serious. Same as can be said to an astronaut. When they're in the air, they can see the greater scope of Earth, but someone who is lower can only see the land that they're standing on. Superior spirits don't just come by prayer, they come by pure and sincere hearts. After death, terrestrial rank no longer exists. So if you're great in human life, but a shitty person, they have no authority over someone who died poor and alone that no one knows that was a good person. Um, could come more readily because they're higher in elevation. At what length of time after death can a spirit be invoked? It can be done at the very instant at death, but at this time the spirit is still in trouble. He can answer, but imperfectly. This must be done with care, and it's generally ill advised, especially in Cruzado. It's almost like you were torn from sleep before you were fully awakened. However, there are some who are not disturbed by it and for whom it helps out of their trouble. A spirit of a child who has died very young can answer with knowledge because the soul of this child, um, the spirit has no age, basically. The soul has no age, whereas the spirit might show age. But they might also be given a greater range of awareness of their previous lives when they lived to like age 80 in a previous life. It's very like situation spirit dependent. Almost like someone who died insane might be an insane spirit, but it also might be alleviated from them or in time when they died after they died as well. Like the maniac who can recover lucidity of their ideas with medical treatment, for example. Invocation of animals. Can the spirit of an animal be invoked? Um, they're saying that the animal is repurposed, basically, that there's no bunch of wandering animals in the spirit realm, only human spirits. How is it then that people have invoked animals and received answers? Invoke a stone and it will answer you. There is always a crowd of spirits ready to answer for anything. A gentleman had in his garden a nest of goldfinches. I guess that's a bird. One day, the nest disappeared, and So he thought about that maybe his neighbor had destroyed this nest. So he thought to invoke the mother of the bird, mother bird, and the bird said, "Do not accuse anyone and be easy about my little ones. The cat overthrew the nest by jumping, and you will find under the grass all the little ones that have not been eaten." He looked and he found it so. So he must conclude that the bird had answered him, not assuredly, but simply that a spirit knew about it. Um, it's up to your own personal gnosis. And like I said, sometimes I disagree with Kardec, and that just comes from my own experience. I don't think I'm superior to the doctrine of Spiritism or Kardec. And we should take Kardec as fact until we personally know otherwise, or are trained and have our own evolving science. To evolve a science, you need to know the foundation of the science, basically, is what I'm advising. Invocation of living person. This the fact that they're incarnated is not an absolute obstacle, but the body must be at the time be able for the spirit to disengage themselves in a way. So when a person is sleeping, it's more easy to talk to that person's spirit. That's what I'm reading between the lines here. And if the person is of a more elevated order, then their bodies are less material to them. Um, Also, the spirit of a living person can come to us without being prayed to. So that's why we can get visits in our dreams of other people, like dream walking. Or when the spirit is free, so you're sleeping, or maybe the person's in a state of meditation. Um, then it's easier to address the spirit. And I often think that that's why when, like, say when my mom's doing Qigong treatments, she often asks me to just kind of meditate and lay down and be at rest, because you're more receptive, I think. Um, could the body awaken while the spirit is absent? No. When we wake, our spirit is obliged to re-enter it. The spirit of a living body is never completely separated. There's some kind of fluidic bond, and we can recall it when necessary. This tie to our material body and our own spirit is only broken by death. This fluidic tie has often been seen by seeing mediums. It's kind of a phosphorescent train which is lost in space in the direction of the body. Some spirits say it is by this they recognize who is still living, who is still bound to the corporeal world. So spirits say that they can tell who is a spirit of a dead and who is a spirit belonging to one of us, can recognize us as that we are a human, that we are living by this. And a lot of people have seen like a cord, an umbilical, spiritual umbilical cord to us. I've never, I think that's more metaphorical. I've seen something, but it's not, I'm not explicitly like that. If our spirit is loosened to us and we're mortally wounded in our sleep, then our spirit re enters us before death. There's a law, spiritual law, regulating the union of our soul and our body as we are incarnated. Um, the spirit of an incarnated person is a bit more restrictive, however, for us to communicate with them, because we're linked to matter. Someone who responded to this question answered, "I am always chained to the ball I drag after me, like our body's like a heavy, like an anchor." It's difficult but not impossible to invoke the spirit of a person who is awake. Sometimes invoking the spirit of a living person can cause them to go sleep, so that in order for us to do this, when the invocation is made with the consent of the person, and then they go lay down for this purpose or whatever, and doze. Um, it's preferable than forcing a person, or the person then under our influence sleeps, to communicate with us. A living person is not always conscious of us invoking their spirit. Their spirit may know it, but might not translate to their intellect. They may often have a vague impression of it, like a dream, though, that we are doing this to an incarnated person. In other existences, we may not have known each other. Why this may happen spontaneously, or we may be related and we don't know this somehow in this world. The invoked person who's incarnated will answer depend on their elevation and their own judgment. Um, in a somnambulic state, it's very similar. It's kind of like a magnetic sleep. The spirit of somnambulist would answer more lucidly because they're used to doing this. It's one of their abilities, basically. However, they can't. A spirit of a somnambulist who's invoked can't communicate simultaneously at 2 points in time across the world, because that's only able to be done by spirits who are disengaged by matter. Can the ideas of a person in a waking state be modified by acting on their spirit during sleep? Yes, sometimes. Is the spirit of a living person free to say or not what they will? They can, but they can be also influenced, just like as a negative spirit can influence a person. Um, they may speak more freely than they would as if we talked to them in life, because in life they have more prejudices and we're talking more to their spirit. Their spirit may attach more or less importance to certain things than in our ordinary state, and their conscious may speak more freely. If they do not wish to speak, they can possibly leave, or their spirit cannot be retained because it can just go back to their body. Can the spirit of a living person be forced by another spirit to speak, such as among wandering spirit? There's no supremacy except for moral superiority, and if you're morally superior, then you would not abuse or do this, basically. So you have to have better intentions in doing this for the most part. Unless you're inferior, commanding it even more inferior, I guess, reading between the lines again. Can one invoke a spirit whose body is still in the mother's womb? Um, so can communicate with like a baby, basically a fetus. They're saying that the moment of incarnation only takes place at the child's first breath, but at conception, um, the spirit is designed to animate it. So the spirit already exists in the spiritual realm, but the spirit's not attached to the material form yet, basically. So you're not really talking to the spirit in the womb, you're talking to the spirit who's going to go into the womb outside of the body, basically. Could a deceiving spirit take the place of a living invoked person? Yes. Are there dangers in invoking a living person? It's not always without danger. If they're sick, it may add to their sufferings, because you're tampering with their vital fluid, basically, or their life force. In what case could the invocation of a living person have the most dangers? You should abstain from invoking children of a very tender age, elderly, people who are seriously ill, because their body is weakened. The suspension of intellectual faculties during a waking state can also be dangerous if, at that time, the person finds himself in need of the presence of mind. So, in a trance state, something could happen to our physical body, and that's also why we have La Plaza and people protecting the mediums, because something could happen, like they could fall, like the physical body, say when a spirit leaves, the physical body could fall and we could hurt ourselves. So oftentimes the medium's not just protected from spiritual dangers and the community protected from spiritual dangers, but from physical dangers. A spirit in this state who said his body was tired answered, "My spirit is like a balloon tied to a post. My body is the post which is shaken by the strugglings of the balloon." Book of Mediums, Part 2, Chapter 25. We're just getting to the end of the chapter. It was a very long chapter with a lot of very technical information and a lot of new information that Kardec has not covered before about channeling other people's spirits who are incarnated in a body, channeling other human spirits who are actually in a physical body incarnated among us. So thank you for watching the first part. If you've not done so, then please watch the first part of chapter 25. And then we'll keep going. We're almost at the end of the medium's book in totality, as well as this should be a short second part here. So, saying, as the invocation of a living person be dangerous when made without precaution, does not the danger exist when we invoke a spirit we do not know to be incarnated and may find himself in an unfavorable condition? No, the circumstances will be the same. He will only come if in a position to do so. And have I not told you to ask before doing this to make an invocation if possible? So have their consent. And it also already gave us warnings about the physical health of the person that we're targeting. When at the most inopportune times we experience an irresistible desire to sleep, does it warn us that we may be being invoked by someone? It may occur, but most often it's a purely physical effect. Either the body or the spirit has its own need of liberty. Remark: a lady of our acquaintance, a medium, one day invoked the spirit of her grandson who was sleeping in the same room. His identity was confirmed by the language and his familiar expressions of the child and his recital of several things that had happened to him at boarding school. But one special circumstance confirmed this. Suddenly the hand of the medium paused in the middle of the sentence, and it was impossible to obtain anything further. At this moment the child, half awake, moved in his bed. Some moments later, after he regained sleep, the hand began to channel again. The invocation of living people under good conditions proves, in the least contestable manner, the distinct action of the spirit in the body and the existence of the intelligent principle independent of matter. They have like a newsletter which they call Revue Spirit, because he's French, which is the Spirit Review. Pages I 860, 11, and 18, which I haven't really been able to see a lot of digital copies of these newsletters, if you guys know of any access to them. Show several remarkable examples of invocation of living people. Human telegraphy. Could two people, by invoking each other, transmit their thoughts and thus correspond? Yes. And this human telegraphy will someday be a universal means of correspondence. So basically, two people in the same room, we can talk to each other mentally or by distance. And this is probably also like how a mother knows that their child is in danger as well. So it's they're calling it telegraphy, but it's really like what we consider telepathy. Why should it not be practiced at present? So it is with some people, but not every one. Men must purify themselves in order that their spirit may be disengaged from matter. And this is still another reason for making the invocation in the name of God. Until then, it is confirmed to choose and dematerialize souls who are rarely met in the actual state of the world's inhabitant. So the more material we are, the less able we're going to be able to have these abilities of telegraphy and to be able to match ourselves with somebody else who's also at this level or doing this. So, sorry everybody, I was disrupted in doing the chapter 25, and I'll try to minimize that in the future. And this was a very long chapter, but I think it was a lot of material we need to cover. So, thank you. Bye, guys.